Welcome to Be Schooled, a podcast by Stacy Blackman Consulting, bringing you tips, advice, and insight into all aspects of the MBA admissions process and business school experience. And now, here's your host, writer, author, and Harvard MBA, who's been an MBA admissions consultant for over a decade, Erica Olson.
So I'm so happy to have with me today one of my clients, Nick Chu, who I worked with in 2017's round one, and who is one of those rare unicorns who achieved admission to both Harvard Business School and Stanford Graduate School of Business. Nick is also second in a long line of military applicant referrals that I've been working with since 2016. He's now wrapping up his second year at HBS under what's obviously very trying circumstances that nobody could have foreseen. Nick, thank you so much for doing this. We're going to dedicate some time at the end of our chat to talk about HBS's response to COVID-19. We'll do that at the end. But just to kick things off, how are you doing and where exactly are you right now?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me, Erica. It's really great to chat with you again.
Yes.
I am currently at HBS, obviously not going to school anymore, but still living on campus in Boston, doing online classes. And unfortunately, we're, not together anymore. But just still trying to make the best out of the year and try to virtually spend some time with classmates before graduation.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things that the stories we're going to have for our grandkids, right? But I'm glad to hear that you are staying safe and healthy and that you're there and you guys are trying to make the best of it. So first, as I'm sure you remember from this process, everybody's always pretty obsessed with stats, even though I'm a firm believer in the fact that having solid stats is by no means a guarantee of success, because everybody pretty much applying to these schools already deserves to be at a top program based on their career and academic performance. But since we know everybody's going to want to know, are you okay with, before we get into this, me reading off some of just kind of the baseline information on you before we get into what really I feel like set you apart from the pack?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So your MBA elevator pitch, for lack of a better term, is that you had graduated with a 3.88 from West Point and had about 5 years of military experience once you started at HBS. You got a 730 on your GMAT with a 41, which was 94th percentile, and verbal at that point in time, and then a 47, or what was a 77th percentile in quant. You also scored above the 90th percentiles in your writing assessment and your integrated reasoning on the GMAT. And then you were stationed in Hawaii for the Army, and at the time you applied, your last kind of position in the Army was that you had been working in foreign affairs. So first things first, how did you come to realize you actually even wanted an MBA?
So I've always kind of had a inkling that I wanted to do something in business. I remember as a young kid, I started my own eBay business, and I just loved and was fascinated by, the idea of running an enterprise. So that was as a young kid. But then growing up, I decided that I wanted to join the military for personal reasons. I thought I wanted to serve my country and kind of give back a little bit. And I kind of went into the military open-ended, thinking I was going to, serve, kind of take the leadership lessons, and I really enjoyed it. But after about 3-4 years, I was like, okay, so I've really done basically all the things that I've wanted to do in the military. It was a fantastic experience. Worked with some wonderful people. But, I thought it was time to pursue that second passion, that second career, which was business, which I've always wanted to do. So I just made the decision 3 or 4 years in that, it's time to, end this chapter while it's still going well and move on to the next thing.
And, as I mentioned earlier, you were actually referred by one of my 2016 clients who had also been in the military, and he had also ended up at HBS. But at the beginning of the process, I made you do a bunch of introspection and then brainstorm outlines for your Stanford essays, which is what we started with first. And just as a side note to readers, usually when a client is applying to a list of schools and they have Stanford in the mix, I always have them start there because that is the program that requires the most effort. And Nick, it's actually even more effort now than when you applied. When you applied, there was a mini essay that was in like the data form, or what we call the application itself, about how something from your background influenced how you were able to contribute at work. And then they had their two main essays, what matters most to you and why, and then the shorter one asking why Stanford. Now they've actually added 3 more essays to the mix, which give the applicant the chance to detail out 3 accomplishments where they feel they made an impact. Those essays are optional, but I always have my clients write them because it's like, why wouldn't you want to take the opportunity to have the AdCom get to know you better? But anyway, I just wanted to make sure readers understood that at the time you applied, there was just those 3 essays. There weren't the 3 other optional ones. And right before we started talking, I had looked back on those drafts you did, the first drafts that you did. And I have to say that, all of the kind of upfront introspection that you did and that we worked through together, I feel like it really paid off, because while we ended up kind of redoing your outline for what matters most fairly significantly, the main themes of the mini essay and the why Stanford essay, where you also normally should cover your future career goals, were really there from the start. And we'll talk at a high level about some of the general themes you wrote about in a second. But before we get into that, what do you even remember about the application process overall? I know it was a few years ago. I'm just curious if you remember that there was anything that surprised you or something that made you particularly stressed, or if there was parts you maybe actually even liked. Is there anything that kind of jumps out at you about the process itself when you think back on it?
Yeah, I think, it was a while ago, but there's some things that stick out to me. I think overall, I actually really enjoyed the process, which I know might sound a little crazy. But those, the brainstorming and the kind of self-reflection at the beginning really helped. And I really appreciated the opportunity to force myself to sit down and think through, hey, what really does matter to me, right? It's not something that I did on the regular. And I think it really helped me get back to what I wanted to get out of life at that point, and what were some of those things that really mattered. I think my one point that I will add to that is that, like, I really appreciated how much time that I gave myself, and I would highly recommend that as well. I think we started you sent me the application materials in like February. And you told me, hey, Nick, take a solid month, write like 20 pages or whatever, just like go free flow, free train of thought.
Yeah.
I spent that month and I just started writing about all the things, the experiences, my values, and trying to dig deep. And I would say that time and experience was invaluable, both from a personal growth standpoint and also from just giving yourself enough time to put those good stories and important things on paper, which you can then go back into later in the process. So I think giving yourself enough time for me made the process so much more enjoyable, because, I spent a month up front brainstorming, sent it to you, and then we had another 4 or 5 months after that to, write the essays, do the million drafts, and go back and forth, and you tore it apart, and then we went back to the drawing board. But I think just not being stressed about it, because knowing that you have a lot of time, was really helpful for me and made it much more enjoyable.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up something that I actually will be talking about in another episode, which is giving yourself enough time. I'd actually also mentioned on another episode that this year, especially with the COVID-19 situation, we've seen kind of a bump in people applying, signing up with us early. And I already have a few clients for round one who started, again, like you had in February. You were actually very rare. Like the fact that you had started so early for, when applications usually aren't out until like July or something, was rare. But we're seeing that happen more and more now. And I think that either people are understanding that they do need that time for introspection, or, with